Hi, everybody. Welcome to this here high-quality podcast. Mike Erie, Tim Stafford. We are Theo Bros of a different sort, two middle-aged men just making our way through the universe. And, Jango Fett, Attack of the Clones, I think. What does he say? I'm a simple man trying to make my way through the universe. There's some movies, even Tim. Yeah. You're not a Star Wars guy, which
I love Star Wars. I just have blocked out the prequels.
Oh, come on now. Ladies and gentlemen.
And the sequels.
Yeah, seriously. We are so delighted to be with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we continue to hear from a few of you who have actually listened to every episode. That is, I don't even have words for that, but I thank you. I guess I'm sorry. I guess we're going on 9 years next month. 9 stinking years of the Vox, then the Voxology Podcast. 9 years, dude. I started this when I was 21. It's amazing.
Look at you now.
And 9 years. That's incredible.
It's not the years, babe. It's the mileage.
Now, come on, Indy. Let's go, dude. Great Indiana Jones reference. All right. We got just a couple of things before we get to Genesis, the new normal, part 2. Part 2. First of all, I was a guest on the Holy Post podcast, and they have me every now and again. If one of the 3 central characters cannot make it, I go and do a news segment. And I love it. It's fun. They're just great. Phil listens. So hi, Phil. Sky listens too. I don't know if he listens as regularly. Phil, though, I get texts from Phil quite often. And so anyway, we were having a conversation about an article about a guy named Matt Walsh, I think is his name. And I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. I guess he has a movie out. My wife has told me he has a movie where he goes in and he's disguised or something, and he's and he had one about what does it mean to be a woman, or I don't know. I don't know much of anything, but I do know we were talking about that article, and we're just kind of making the point, hey, I'm not sure that's the way of Jesus. And I made a statement that was, hey, you can't follow the Sermon on the Mount and engage in a culture war. You can't do both at the same time. It's impossible. Anyway, long story short, Phil, and particularly Phil, but Phil and Sky have been objects of scorn and are labeled woke liberals. And so this clip where I was in and talking about the Sermon on the Mount got back to Mr. Walsh and got retweeted to
I didn't know any of
his followers. Well, yeah, I didn't really know much of this either until I started getting. I got emails. I started getting really nasty emails at my work account. One of them was, instead of being a smarmy fat ass, why don't you get in shape and become a man?
There you go. There it is.
And I was like, I'm trying. Yes.
Note taken.
Agreed. So all of a sudden that kind of was happening, and it was like, oh, okay. Well, this, I'm sure Phil and Sky, deal with a lot of this much more than you and I do. We just get corrected on grammar and pronunciation of names, and sometimes, Tim, your references aren't that great. And did you read the email we got about the people who have a drinking game whenever you interrupt?
Yes,
I felt vindicated. Yes,
there you go.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Take a drink.
I don't know if it's a real game or they've thought about having a drinking game, but either way. So all that is to say, there was I made the mistake of finding out about this and then scrolling through the comments of pushing back on my contribution to this conversation, which was about the Sermon on the Mount and the culture war. There were loads of comments that were like, hey, the Sermon on the Mount is a culture war. Where in the Sermon on the Mount exactly does it tell us we can't engage in culture war? There was a lot of like, these are beta males, whatever. And a lot of the arguments were, we've tried this. It doesn't work. This was Donald Trump Jr.'s statement several years ago. We've tried turning the other cheek. It doesn't work. And so I just wanted to take a moment, not because I care in any way, shape, or form, but because we have talked a lot about the Sermon on the Mount and culture warring.
Yeah.
And we're not big enough fish to be on the attention of anyone's radar. And hallelujah, I don't care particularly about that. But I thought it was so interesting because the questions were, what part of the Sermon on the Mount rules out culture war? And I was just thinking about it, and I thought, well, I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think and what our community thinks. And not in any way being smarmy, although I may add smarmy fat ass to my my bio somewhere, because fat ass, true, and smarmy, I'm sure I have that gear. No doubt. Tim would probably know best. So I don't want to be that. I am trying to get into shape, doggone. I played pickleball 2 hours this morning. 2 hours of pickleball this morning, Timothy.
There you go.
Yep. 60, 70, and 80-year-old women, and I was on fire. So I was just thinking about the Sermon on the Mount, and we did a lot of work on it, and I was like, well, when Jesus commends the poor in spirit, those who are mourning, the meek will inherit the land, which is such an interesting, that's an Old Testament promise. And meekness, you couldn't get a more opposite posture of cultural dominance than meekness. Yep. Those who are mercy, those who are peacemakers. So he seems to bless and pronounce kingdom blessing over this whole range of people who they're not just these things like, hey, anyone who's peacemaking, but it's like, these are categories of Old Testament promise that those who trust in God's righteousness to deliver them, not their own strength, not their own, agendas, purposes, whatever, but God will fulfill the promises. Those who are mourning over the evil in the world, the corruption of the land, that mourning will be met with promise and fulfillment. Those who are seeking the peace and shalom of the land, they will find the shalom of the land, that kind of thing. So you start there, and then you get into this greater righteousness conversation that rules out directly anger, contempt, and name calling. Yeah. I mean, you just can't, it couldn't be like, to do that according to Jesus is to put you in dangers of the fire of Gehenna, and then it's like the whole eye for eye thing, like evil for evil. We've talked about this. Return insult for insult, or lie for lie, or exaggeration for exaggeration. That whole posture of resistance is ruled out by Jesus. He gives us examples of creative goodness that aren't passive, right, but they're circumscribed by the following command, which is to love your enemies.
Creative goodness.
Exactly. If you only love those who love you, what good is it? How are you in any way distinct from the tax collectors? So I'm all for opposing evil in the world. I'm all for resisting evil in the world. The Sermon on the Mount is resistance, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But it's how we resist and what we resist that's at issue here. And then he talks about not doing your good deeds for public consumption. He gets into judgment. Do not judge. And he means the kind of judgment that condemns. Do not live in fear, and thus so treasure things of this age that you just simply live in fear. Mm-hmm. He talks about the posture we're to have towards one another is to ask, to seek, to knock. And that the test of a true disciple is their obedience to this section of Jesus' teaching. So all that said, and who cares about what anyone's saying? This is seriously, I have no interest in pursuing any of this. But the reason it was interesting was the pushback on, no, the Sermon on the Mount is culture war. Mm-hmm. And in one sense, if you mean by that, it's resistant to the dominant relational patterns of culture, then yes. If you mean by that, it's a means of asserting dominance over others, then, man, I think that's really, really off in a harmful reading of the text. So That's what I got on that. You want to add anything, my friend? Because we've just spent a lot of time talking about culture warring, and I am very much open to being wrong. I mean, very much open to being wrong on this. But I think that I don't know. I just don't. I think that posture towards culture of antagonism, of provocation, of contempt, I do think that's ruled out. So I don't know. That's just a couple of thoughts off my head.
I don't think you're wrong at all for my 2 cents. I feel like he really makes it very clear, he being Jesus, not Matt Walsh, on like what it means to hold what it looks like to hold that posture. And he gives so many examples over and over again to like try to make it really clear, like this is how you inhabit this space. And none of it is that. And I'm very familiar with Walsh, and this is how he makes his living, is provoking and stoking fires, and it's just what he does. And the thing that you're referencing, I was unaware of it too until I was going to go book a ticket to the movies, and I saw this as one of the movies that was playing in the local theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, what? And then I read the bio and I watched the trailer, and it was just like, he is in disguise trying to provoke people to say, he just does these gotcha things.
Is it kind of like a Borat sort of thing?
Yeah, but way less creative and more just like trying to trap people to help support. He'll like try to trick people into their responses so that they give the response that he's trying to get, and then being like, see, told you, own the libs. Like, this is what they think about. They don't believe in gender and they don't believe in this.
Yeah.
Which we talked about in my class this week with gender. We read an article called When Boys Become Men. And the article was written in like 1993 by a reporter, but he was talking about this idea about how men as boys are not allowed to show emotion. You can't rat somebody out. You can't, you don't be a sissy, take a hit, because that's the manly thing to do. And then what that does as boys become men and inhabit these gender roles with that. And I asked my students, like, this was written, 31 years ago. Do you guys still feel like this is a thing? And we had this big conversation. Wow. They all said yes, that they still feel those societal pressures. Some said that they're good and some said that they're bad. But I don't know. It's such a mess. And it does pit, because we were having a conversation about how very openly there's folks akin to Matt Walsh who are advocating for the 19th Amendment to be overturned in this next election, and how women shouldn't be voting.
That's something he says?
I don't know if it's him, but there's a bunch of folks that are in that similar camp that are saying,
can I ask you a question, Timothy?
Yeah.
No. And again, drink if you're on the mic interrupting train here. Do you think, see, this all feels so performative to me. People saying things like that, like they don't really mean that. I mean, maybe they do, but they're performing. It's like, it's not, I don't know. It all feels so empty, and it's like, even engaging with this stuff just gives it amplification, and it's so much nonsense.
Like, here's my problem with it, or what I'm nervous about.
Okay, tell me.
Well, I get worried that, yes, it is provocation and it is whatever to try to just get your name out there or get heard or seen or whatever.
Yeah.
Until someone takes a big gun and goes to a pizza parlor to shoot up Hillary Clinton's, trafficking pizza party in the basement that doesn't exist. Like, that's the problem, is all this rhetoric inspires violence, and it inspires othering, and it inspires young men. Like we were talking a couple years ago about how a bunch of my students were writing articles about how masculinity is under attack, and they were quoting Andrew Tate and all this kind of stuff. And if you're familiar with Andrew Tate and where that road led him, it's very dark. He's arrested overseas for trafficking, but he was the one that was inspiring all these young men to, like, this is what it means to be a man, and men are under fire, and you got to own your manhood, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it is causing younger folks or folks who are looking for identity to inhabit that space. So whether it is just rhetoric and performative stuff, it is inspiring actual action.
No,
So
no doubt. No doubt. But like, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Anyway, it's just such an interesting, and I think Russell Moore, I think he's like he was an ethicist for the SBC or something, and then it's not, or I need to get more familiar with all of this, but I think he wrote a book and was saying in the book that whenever he preaches the Sermon on the Mount, he receives criticism for, and it's like, okay, I mean, I get it. If like the stakes are so high that we've got to win the culture war, then why in the world would you turn cheeks and walk miles and do all the creative goodness things?
Yeah.
But
like we talked about last week with did you look up the bear and the man in the wood thing at the
No.
It just came down to
you were going to bring
asking women. Well, yeah. So it was asking women what would you rather meet in the woods, a man or a bear? Like, what's the larger threat? And by and large, women chose the bear. They would rather survive a bear attack than an attack from a man. But these gender dynamics and these ways of posturing and men over women, it fosters this.
Yeah.
It's just gross.
That's our piece of Genesis today. As soon as we get through this email. Yes. Mike and Tim. So for the last 2 years in May, we have a thing called the non-conference, or the Nonferences for short. And we gather, which we keep it under 20 people who are Christian ministry, vocationally adjacent. So these can be pastors, these can be nonprofit workers, Christian school teachers. They're doing something. And the goal is a whole bunch of repair and health, and how do we engage in this in a healthy way? And we get, man, I don't have words strong enough to convey what these have been like. And to see, what's been going on. They've just been super rewarding, meaningful, significant. And every now and again, we get updates from the crew that has attended, and those are super exciting. But I got a question from one of them. Mike, you've made a few comments recently related to the difficulty of being a pastor if we want to actually follow Jesus for the right reasons. Statements like getting paid to be a Christian makes it harder to be a Christian, and similar sentiments. Reading between the lines, it's almost like you're saying it's a spiritual disadvantage to be a paid full-time pastor in the American context. Yes. I'm sorry you've had to read between the lines. That's exactly right. Being a pastor myself, who is seriously contemplating being done after this year, I resonate a lot with those comments, but it makes me want to ask, why are you still a pastor? Perhaps your answer will be an encouragement to me in a season of a lot of discouragement and struggle. Ooh. So what we're going to talk about here, even though we're going to frame it in terms of pastoring, the vast majority of our dear listenership of 50 are not pastor types, and they're just doing secular work, and I use that pejoratively in mockery of the email and rant we did last the idea that
see last episode.
Yeah. There is no such thing as secular work. But being paid by a church, or being paid to write Christian books, or being paid to produce Christian music, anytime money gets introduced into Christian things, Christian school, right? And now you have performance incentives. What loses there isn't the money side, it's the Christian side of all of those equations. And so, yes, Jesus was so abundantly clear, particularly in his woes against the Pharisees, that those who have public platforms, those who claim to teach, those who have a financial incentive of appearing more holy than they are, all of them are at greater risk of Gehenna than those who are in different situations. And so, in American Christianity, we have elevated staff people and paid personalities and influencers above ordinary. And I'm saying we should see these people as disadvantaged in the kingdom. In the same way Jesus talked about wealth. Well, you can be wealthy and follow Jesus. Wealth makes it harder to follow Jesus, not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And vocational paychecks that hinge on you being Christian make it harder to follow Jesus, not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Christian school teacher and reluctant ex-Young Life leader and, First Church of Golgotha. And did you see all those emails I forwarded to you?
I did. And even this conversation, I was just like, this idea with the Walsh and with this too, like of taking places of power, like that creates a culture that feels it needs to dominate. And it is so antithetical. Like it's just and that is literally the Seven Mountain Mandate. That is the First Church of Golgotha responding to that.
Yeah.
Is like seeking these mountains of power. It's like, it's just, yes, I saw those and I need everyone's addresses. And if there's a few more of you that want stickers, let me know.
Yeah, dude, you listen, we haven't had that kind of response since we offered free coupons to the Chinese buffet. So that was amazing.
But you got a few of those left too. I'll send you those.
Yes. Oh, yes, please. Although I got to get rid of, I may always be smarmy, but I got to get rid of the other side of that equation. Now, so let's grant that that's disadvantage. The question that I think that you seem to be asking, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, is, well, hey, why are you still pastor? And for me, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Timothy. For me, I had to go back. Well, what would I say? So therapy has helped a lot. I could not do vocational pastoring the way I had done it previously and in any way, shape, or form follow Jesus authentically. I was trying to follow Jesus authentically, but I was and I don't even mean this purely in the past tense, but I was a performer. I had a false self and shadow side that I was trying to hide. I was trying to hide you by being competent as a Bible teacher and being competent as a pastor. And so I was using some of that to hide the shadow sides of my personality and my character. I care deeply about having a name and reputation. And I just felt loads of pressure when I would step on stage to perform well and, not want to disappoint people. That whole way of ministering crumbled through a series of things that I did and things that happened. And so I was in a spot. I was applying to the post office. I thought, all right, I'm going to be a mail carrier or a UPS guy, which sound amazing, by the way. And I had a friend of mine, John Mark Comer, who, he just said, so much of what we see in the New Testament is God calling people back into the places that they were hurt and unhealthy, but doing those things differently with a different group of people. And that really, really resonated with me. And so I had given up on being a pastor. My crew and I, including one, Tim Stafford, we all kind of agreed, hey, if I were ever going to do the pastor thing, it would have to be under very different circumstances. I was not going to be a lead pastor. It needed to be a small church. I was not going to pursue publicness and platforming. I was just going to be a faithful thing and have my feet rooted in a local group of people. And I have to tell you, it's been absolutely transforming. And so I'm delighted. And not that I don't have all of, or some of those old habits and patterns, but they don't have any power and they're no longer dominant. Because through therapy and loads of other things, I've begun to see what those things are and how they creep in. And so I don't stay up late worrying about sermons. I take great naps on Sundays going, well, that could have blown chunks, but my job is to be faithful, not effective. Like when we say that, like that's been a mantra for me.
Yeah.
Because my generation we were the Rob Bells, the Mark Driscolls, the emergent church. We were all about publishing deals and the things, and all of that has just been so exposed in its emptiness. So I've actually been completely recaptured by the local church. And I was always captured by the theory, but the reality of it and all of its weirdness. I mean, it's not like just this perfect thing that is sitting there existing, but I have been able to taste and see what doing that, which I have gifts in, but in doing that with healthy people as a healthier person, with different goals and values in mind, how rich that has been in my life. And so I'm glad that I had a discerning crew of people who weighed through under what circumstances would pastoring be healthy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fortunate to have those doors opened for that exact thing. So that was the big discernment project for me. Was I had loads of experience and not being super healthy, and God was using it, and churches would grow. I'm not saying any of that was horrible, but I wasn't healthy in the midst of it. And so to have a set of criteria by which you could then say, okay, in these circumstances, I'm the healthiest. Man, that was so powerful. And that, really engaged John Mark's comment of healing is often found in the place that wounded you, but with different people coming at it from a different perspective. Anyway, what are your thoughts, Timothy John?
I have left all of that kind of stuff and when I walk into a church, I feel very uncomfortable. So I'm in a very different place. And what was unique about your journey that I think should be helpful for other folks is that there's no like prescriptive way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all gathered around you specifically with where you were and who you were and where you had been. And so to say that there's some version that like here, just buy this and you can navigate this the same way is never the case. And I think the church is really bad at that, like trying to make really simple versions of things, but it took discernment based on the situation you were in. Yeah. I don't feel comfortable in church, which I'm trying to unpack. But I stopped doing all that stuff because of the performative nature. I had such a hard time with feeling like we were putting on a skit every Sunday and inhabiting roles and trying to inspire people to give money and to also inhabit roles. And it just, and this is just for me, it just felt very, very, very performative and false and fake. And so I still, when I walk into a church, I still feel that kind of feeling. Yeah. Like the fact that you can walk into almost any church in America and you're going to lock into the same routine just feels really weird to me, but that's just for me. And I know that really works for people and people are really at home in that, and that's fine. But for me, trying to find like, what does it authentically mean to be, a follower of this rabbi from a couple thousand years ago is partly the conversation that started this episode with how do you not engage and how do you not fight, but how do you resist faithfully and lovingly? I find myself trying to wrestle with that with like the love your enemy. I keep finding that a lot of my enemy is my tribe, or that's why I'm in opposition to my tribe. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I love the church while resisting things that I think are very ungodly? So I don't know. It's a mess, but just so there for two of us on this podcast, it's a very different place, which was what I was trying to say with the discernment stuff. Like, everyone's path's gonna be different, man. The non-friends, like we do get a lot of those emails, and some people have stepped away and some haven't. And
that's right.
And in both cases, they've been healthy. Like the people that have had to step away have done so with a great amount of torment and wrestling, and have made a healthy choice for them and their family. That was the right choice. And others have been reinvigorated in their positions and are finding healthy ways to navigate it, which is also really wonderful.
Yeah. Yep. And I think this is true regardless of whether or not you're pastoring. The seductions of American Christianity, be they social media driven and performative, be they overly political and you wanting to dominate. I mean, this isn't just something that pastors or, nonprofit, Christian nonprofit folks or school teachers deal with. This is all over the place.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is I've come to realize the absolute necessity of other people in following Christ, that it's not and can never has been or never will be me and Jesus, just the two of us. It is literally working it out with a community. And so, for me, the question of what does it look like for me to be in this ministry or in this job or in this whatever as a healthy person, that was just a question I never wrestled with in seminary or in career. It was always like, hey, you go to the next biggest thing. And, and so if you take anything from this, what we do with the Nonferences is we try to ask the question, what does health look like? And can our current circumstances support us being fully human?
Healthy, yeah.
And healthy in that. And if not, we leave. And if so, we stay. For me, I have not in any way, shape, or form given up, and neither has Tim, on the hope of Jesus and the reality of Jesus and the inspiration of the text and the reality and goodness in its best parts of the church. Like, that's why we do this whole thing. So as Cornel West said, I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist. I'm a prisoner of hope. And I am, doggone it, in the middle of all of this. I can't help it. So I have a great deal of hope for the church. I have a great deal of hope for my growing into health. I have a great deal of hope of what the Bible does to people when we let it scramble our preconceived ideas. I think Jesus is real and is doing some really powerful work in American culture through this whole deconstructing thing. And so all that is to say, thank you for asking. And I'm sorry if that was too long and you're like, I don't care. I don't care why Mike's still a pastor. You will care about this though. This is the second part of the new normal as it pertains to the woman. We're in Genesis, ladies and gentlemen. Last episode, we were looking at the pain of circumstances around the bearing of children, not just labor pain. If you could follow all of that strangled syntax pronunciation, the idea was this is not talking about the physical pain of labor. This is talking about the emotional and psychological pain that comes now with our trying to be human in the world. So God said to the man and the woman, you are equal in your image bearing. You will fill the earth and you will subdue it. So the first thing deals with the filling of the earth. Now that comes with difficulty. The second thing is now about the co-ruling as image bearers. Now there's hierarchy. And then when we get to the man, it's about the subduing. The earth isn't going to cooperate anymore. So all of these impulses about what it is to be human, to rule together, to fill and to subdue, all of that now is being frustrated. All right? And part of the reason it's being frustrated is, baked into sin is its own punishment. Right. So the failure of being human means we image other things and we grow enslaved to the things that we're imaging. So injustice and idolatry are just wrapped together throughout the Old Testament text. God doesn't have to do anything extra. That's just what it is to image something false or hollow. But I also think there's Like the fact that human beings are so tied to creation that Paul will say in Romans, creation is waiting for the image bearers to be revealed as true image bearers. He calls them as sons of God. And creation is groaning until that day. I think there's something in the image bearing dynamic that supercharges creation too. Do you know what I mean? I think God created something that is so woven together that you can't affect part of it without affecting all of it. And so that's why it's the filling is now that's encased in difficulty. The ruling is encased in difficulty, and the subduing is encased in difficulty. And so what does it mean to be human? It means to live under the shroud of difficulty, pain, and death, right? And that defines the human experience. Like, of course, we get momentary joy. And of course, there's so many good things in God that reflect God's goodness in his world. But the dominant notes of human experience are difficulty, disappointment, and ultimately death. And so Genesis 3 tells us, if Genesis 1 is the ideal and Genesis 2 is kind of the reality, Genesis 3 then is the explanation for why we experience the world that we experience rather than the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 world that is described. So, and to the woman, he said, I will greatly multiply the pain around childbearing, and in grief you will give birth to children. And this is the second part we'll look at today. And your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Now, loads of debate about these two words, desire. Yeah, seriously. Let's close in prayer. Loads of debate about these two words, desire and rule. And you can break all the debate down into, do you think these words are positive, describing a positive state of affairs, or a negative state of affairs? So if desire is positive, as the word is used in Song of Solomon, then this is the woman's sexual desire or romantic desire. If the word rule is positive, then God's intention is that the man should rule over the household. If one of the words is positive and the other one is negative, that opens up all sorts of other alternative alternative explanations. But I think the context is super, super clear on this in a slam dunk kind of way that both of these words are negative. Right? So the word desire, teshuka, he said, butchering, teshuka just means a longing. Okay, so we're not sure if that's good or bad. And that is combined with the word rule, which is mashal. It means to rule, to have dominion, to reign. All right? Now, what's fascinating is that the word rule here, mashal, is different from the word rule when the two humans are to rule over creation together. That word is rida. Again, butchering. So just pretend I know what I'm talking about. All right? So the question is, we have your longing will be for your husband, and he will have dominion over you. Again, positive or negative. Well, what's fascinating is in the very next chapter, these two words are used, and they're used in a negative context. Right? So we've talked about this little text, Cain. Pardon me. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires you. Teshuka. But you must rule, mashal, over it. All right, so it's fascinating that separated by only one chapter, these two words are used. Now, interestingly, though, in this instance, teshuka is still negative. It's desire, sin's desire, and it's portrayed as a predatory animal crouching to spring, to control you, is the idea. But you must mashal over it. So mashal here is good. You must rule and reign over sin, have dominion over sin. Sin wants to control you, but you must have dominion over it. But it's interesting that when we get to the male and the female, a different word for rule is used because they're co-ruling as opposed to mashal, which is used in Genesis 3. So the argument I'm making, and I'm following loads of others in this, is that both of these words are negative here in Genesis 3. And the desire that's being spoken of is the desire to have mastery over. Mm-hmm. The woman will desire to have mastery over your husband, and he will rule in the bad way over you. Instead of being a partner with you in ruling, he will try to rule over you. Mm-hmm. And this is the first drip of hierarchy. Now, I have some very good complementarian friends and scholars who will say, no. The man was made first, so he's primary. We've talked a bit about that in the sense that there was a human, and we don't know if it was a man or woman, that was made first. Secondly, they will argue, well, doesn't the man name the woman? And actually, he does not. He classifies the woman as flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. He does not name her. He classifies her. He doesn't name her until after the fall, after they are exiled from Eden. He doesn't give her a name. So in my humble view, that the hierarchy we see being baptized into the church and by the church is actually a baptism of the fall, not the baptism of God's ideal in Genesis 1 and 2, which are co-ruling, co-equal, co-image bearing partners. And it would make sense that if childbearing, filling is difficult now and subduing is difficult, then the ruling would be difficult too. And you see this right when this couple succumbs to the temptation to image the snake, right? He blames her, she blames the snake, he blames God. I mean, and then all you have, the rest of Genesis, are how horribly treated women are, mm-hmm. and how manipulative some women could be. Right? So you've got infertility, and you've got Abram selling out Sarah. You've got Rachel being manipulative around Esau. You've got Dinah being just violated. I mean, it's just all awful. The shalom of 2 and 3 is just unraveling. Excuse me, the shalom of 1 and 2 is just unraveling in chapter 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when you get to Paul and it's just, okay, I need to say one line before I get to there.
Also, can you just reiterate, we're imaging the fallen nature from chapter 3, not the original design, the ideal in 1 and 2. But we seem to be purposefully choosing to image the fallen stature, the fallen state.
Yes. Now, obviously, there are whole huge tribes of Christianity that disagree with that.
Good for them.
We would disagree with them, and that's part of working all of this out. So a non-negotiable for me in my church involvement is that women have to be in all levels of leadership. That's part of what it means for me to be healthy. And for you, I mean, you've said it so beautifully. You don't want Mazzy growing up thinking she has no place in preaching, teaching, leading.
It's a non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. two middle-aged men in therapy with daughters. There's one quote though I want to read that's just the man is now treating her as an object of his rule instead of a partner in his rule. And I was like, dang, that is so stinking true. Again. The man is now treating her as an object of his rule rather than as a partner in his rule, right? So she's now something to be ruled rather than co-ruling together. And you know, man, when you get into marriage, all of our married folks or divorced folks or widowed folks, even all of our single people who've ever dated, shalom is not often the predominant characteristic of male and female relationships. It's very often conflict and striving and power games. So much of when I fight with my wife, it's trying to hurt or win or whatever it is, and it's just like it's just a default setting. It's just a default setting. My default setting isn't looking at her as an image bearing, saying, "How can I help? How can we co-rule all of this together?" You know, it's. I feel like she's desiring to have control, and so I resist in anger, whatever it is. It's just and obviously we can stereotype this in ways that don't do the text justice. The text is just saying, in general, the commissions of image bearing, fill, rule, and subdue, are now subject to frustration and difficulty.
Yeah.
And so our co-rulership is now frustrated. And so, yes, it's a power struggle. And I desperately want to be the kind of person who shares power and sees my wife as a fully human image bearer. And of course I would say that, but there are times when I don't trust her with things or whatever. Say it. Sharp intake of breath.
I'm raising my hand.
Yep. No drink there.
I think I mentioned last week I'm meeting with some friends, some male friends, trying to provoke some vulnerability and conversations around like just not holding trauma or whatever. But last night we talked a ton about shame and our generation in particular, with the I Kiss Dating Goodbye and just the ways in which sex and relational dynamics were kind of packaged for us. We're walking into marriage, as we've talked about ad nauseum, with a lot of shame and false guilt and some true guilt over things that, you know, so it's interesting because, you know, we're talking about shame and we're talking about sexual desire and how that's been kind of twisted around and how we have a history of objectifying. And then, but when you were talking right there, what I'm thinking about is like how not only we're not just imaging the fallen nature, we're actually like, we've made it the actual standard. Like we look at women and strip of agency and we call them manipulative and we call like, you're the seductress. My desires and my things are not in my control. We're from that generation that was raised thinking that as men, like on Twitter right now, the Billy Graham thing is like, it's a huge topic of conversation.
It's blowing up
right now. Yeah. But it's like, that's literally based in some of these same things of like, she's only coming to seduce you and manipulate you and tear you down. So it's not only are we like imaging it, it's like we're anointing it and making it the actual standards by which we operate. Does that make sense? Like, it's like we're pursuing to inhabit that stuff, not just imaging it, but like we're actively putting energy and agency into those positions. And then you look at this, like the 19th Amendment being repealed and all that kind of stuff. It's literally the ruling in that way. Like you don't deserve to have a voice because you should be behind the headship of your home. This is biblical. Like it's Christian men saying this stuff.
Yeah.
And the trad wife movement and
and if you want to, great. If you want to be a traditional wife, hallelujah. If you want to be a stay-at-home, we shouldn't call this biblical though, because man, biblical marriage was a load of polygamy. Back in the Old Testament, you know, God said, don't do it. And then they do it, and then he adds a command. Well, if you're gonna do it, don't ignore your first wife.
I'll just throw a bunch of concubines in too.
So yes, and we have, speaking of ad nauseum, I hope we have thoroughly railed against the biblical manhood and womanhood thing, because you can turn this into, oh yeah, women are all manipulators, tempters, exactly what you're saying. And so male purity depends on, having dress codes at church and whatever else. Whereas Jesus, of course, if you're captured by lust, you go ahead and take your hand and your eye and, get rid of them.
Your hand, your eye.
Yeah, it wasn't the woman.
It's just so funny. The same culture that says like you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do anything, be a man, rise up, is the same culture that's like, oh, but you can't handle this. Like you can't be near a woman.
You can't listen. Kids can't. Yeah, no one can learn to control their sexual impulses. They're gonna drink. Don't worry about it. I mean, it's literally, it is so. The messages, the mixed messages are immense and insane. So
confusing to a culture outside of our culture. Like,
oh my goodness,
you say this, but you do this, and then you do this, but this person said this, and
exactly right. So where we're left is he curses the serpent. You will eat dust. Like you're no longer an exalted spiritual being. You're now an earth. You're earthbound. And then he doesn't curse, and this is such a big deal. He doesn't curse the man and the woman, but he almost laments over the new normal. Yeah. That there's difficulty now and frustration around the vocational calls of image bearing, ruling, filling, subduing. And so I find it interesting. I had a professor in seminary who he made a profound point. He said, God frustrates us. So he makes this way more active. He said, no, God is frustrating the humans here so that they cannot find life apart from imaging him. If money could do it, we'd stop there. If sex could do it, we'd stop there. If fame could do it, we'd stop there. But nothing does it. We're insatiable. The more we get, the more we want. There's no end to our greed, our lust for power, our lust for notoriety. And he said, and that is what God did as an act of mercy, so that that human beings would be driven back to image their creator.
So he frustrates humans as an act of mercy.
Yes, that was his argument. And I got to tell you, man, I don't know if that's what this is or not. I see it more as a lament over the new normal. But if God did that, I'm really open to the genius behind that. Like that's brilliant, because I would stop. Like I didn't just wake up and follow Jesus because it made great intellectual sense one day. I mean, I thought that's why I did it. No, I did it because the human life lacked something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like there was something missing in it. And so I don't know. I just thought that was a very interesting theological take, that God is far more active here than I've kind of presented him. That God is frustrating the human's ability to find meaning, purpose, and significance apart from him. And I'm like,
it kind of tracks a little. Like you think about the way the things that Jesus was advocating to resist, they are those things. Or you just look at, like, you just read that list, and all I could think of, the first thing that popped in my head was like all the stuff that's going on with Puff Daddy, with P. Diddy. But it's like, it is dominance in all those different areas, right? It's greed across that board, whether it's notoriety, financial, or sexual, or whatever. It is a greed for more and more and more that doesn't end until you've kind of destroyed everybody.
But why? But why doesn't it satisfy? What is it about being human where all the things that we want never satisfy us? Like, that's what this is getting to. And and I'm not saying, oh, I turned my life to Jesus and now I'm totally satisfied all the time, right? No. That now I don't have any issues or any questions, and the hole in my heart is filled or whatever. No, I think sometimes following Jesus makes the hole in your heart bigger. You know, it makes the experience of life even harder because you're believing that there's this good God who actually cares and is doing something about all of this.
Yeah, and it begs you that there's something, if that hole is small and gets bigger, and when you say that, my brain thinks that's because there is so much more. Like we're just missing, like that hole grows.
It's the national park.
There is, yeah.
I mean, I think there's something to it, man. I do. I just see, again, when I look at the Bible, I continually come away seeing things in color that I'd either never seen before or I'd only seen in black and white. Mm-hmm. And I just sit and I'm like, I think the level of intelligence that we're dealing with here is so far beyond us. And that's like no duh. But like,
is it though?
To be human,
look around.
To be human is to always be wanting. Mm-hmm. Like that's true.
Oh, yeah. I was waiting to be human is to found wanting.
Yes. Exactly. To be human is to always be desiring. Always. Even in our best moments. I desire that this moment stay forever. Like even in our best moments, we're desiring that moment stay, right? I mean, it's just all so shadowy. And maybe that's
Bono has a line that's like, I've been looking for to fill that God-shaped hole. And we just keep stuffing it with like just trying to fill it with whatever, but it
turkey
spoils.
Pumpkin pie.
Puts you to sleep.
Yeah.
No, that's it all makes sense. It tracks.
Yeah. But I could see how it would be mercy. It's like
that also.
Yeah.
There was some clip floating around online from one of the Bruce Almighty movies or something. One of those ones where Morgan Freeman is God because he's got the voice everybody wants to listen to. But he was saying something akin to that with prayer and how God will direct to opportunity for or something about how you pray. But it's like, it is so much more. It's not as like derivative or like, I don't know, the way we just want it to be some certain way, and then we tell people it's a certain way, and then instead it's this invitational thing that is like, even mercy through frustration is a very invitational posture. If that is what it is inviting you through frustration to choose a different way of doing something.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. Ooh. All right, guys. Chewy stuff. That's all I got. That was enough. It was blowing my brain all week.
Yeah.
So anyway, the God who keeps us hungry, the God who disappoints everybody. Like when you look at Jesus, there isn't one person that follows him. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe there are people who follow him who are not disappointed, but there are a lot of people who follow him who are.
Well, I guess it would change. It would depend on how you, like, I wonder if Peter was disappointed or if he like in those situations in which Jesus is like, no, like,
get behind me.
Yeah. I mean, get behind. That's a big statement. And so to think that nobody was, what did you say? Not
disappointed.
Well, I mean, everybody was disappointed at first, right? Like you were supposed to show up to do this and you didn't, and you're doing this and he wants to do what? So there is a lot of disappointment, but it's all based on whatever our hierarchy of what is important is. Right. And so if wealth and success, all those things that you named are what you think are the pinnacles of being human, you're going to be disappointed. But that's not necessarily bad.
No, that's the mercy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is there's nothing sturdy enough to handle. But even among Christians, and this is where I think you're onto something, Tim, the hollowness of the shallow gospel, of the just going to heaven when you die, sin management thing. Like, I'm just encountering people who followed Jesus a long time, and they're literally going, is this it? Like, this is it? We're just holding on?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I do think I think there's more. All right.
I don't know. The now and not yet, being in that in between, feels like it could be pretty frustrating.
Oh, bro.
But frustrating in knowing, yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's a tension, there's a inevitable tension in the now and not yet that, I don't know if frustration is the right word, but
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
I don't know.
Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we think you guys are awesome. We have an Etsy store. Amazing. Tim,
talk about
amazing.
We talk about you guys.
Huh?
We talk about how highly we think of the folks that listen to this, and the insightful emails and the laments and the celebrations and the frustrations and all of it.
First of all, we're surprised that people listen. Secondly, we're surprised that smart people listen. And then thirdly, we're surprised that smart and articulate people email in and say stuff. So thanks. We really are. And I know we say this in joke, but it's very true. Like, we feel very, very privileged to have a seat around your elliptical, or seat in your car, or as you're going to bed, trying to sleep to the sonic boom, Tim's interruptions.
Boom.
Bye, guys.